Okay, let's talk about this last part of chapter 17. Okay, so we're going to talk about acid-base balance. So one of the only things we haven't talked about yet is how the kidneys are involved in balancing, maintaining, modulating pH. And a normal blood plasma pH is a 7.35 to 7.45. That's also really tightly regulated, like sodium ion concentrations, calcium ions. Those are really tightly regulated in the body to make sure and to maintain acid-base balance. Basically the pH of body fluids, just to make sure that they're within normal range. So acid-base balance is when these body fluids are maintained within this normal range, 7.35 to 7.45. Your body's producing hydrogen ions, which is basically offset by the loss of hydrogen ions in normal metabolic processes that produce acids, and the body excretes both acidic and basic substances. So your kidney is able to excrete acids and bases to maintain and ensure that acid-base balance is occurring. So basically, when your body is undergoing metabolism, metabolic processes, producing ATP, a byproduct of that, or byproducts of this metabolism, are both hydrogen ions, which can make for more acidic conditions, which is an acid, and also carbon dioxide, which is also an acid. So these acids are produced and sent into the plasma and can change pH. But to inhibit or prevent changes in pH, you've got buffering systems that buffer these acids and basically render them inactive for a period of time until the respiratory system can expire carbon dioxide or excrete hydrogen. So there's buffering systems here that just temporarily store hydrogen ions and carbon dioxide until that temporary storage is basically temporary forms of storage are sent to the lungs or to the kidney to be actually excreted and removed from the body. So these wastes, carbon dioxide and hydrogen, are produced by our cells and then transported through the blood by way of buffering systems. We'll talk about those buffering systems. And they're transported through the blood by those buffering systems to the lungs or to the kidney to actually excrete those wastes. And the buffering systems are used to be transported so that those acids that are produced don't lower pH too much and then cause problems in the body. So the buffering systems are just kind of like a temporary storage area or temporary storage form of these molecules until they're able to be excreted by the respiratory or urinary systems. So changes in hydrogen ion concentrations are very dangerous. It can alter the stability of plasma membranes, and usually a decrease in hydrogen ion concentrations that's harmful doesn't usually happen. Where we see problems are increases in hydrogen ion concentrations and a decrease in pH. So changes in pH are inversely related to changes in hydrogen ion concentrations. So the more hydrogen ion concentration we have, or the higher the concentration of hydrogen ions we have in the blood, the lower your pH will be. So lowering decreases in pH and increases in hydrogen ion concentrations are much more prevalent, and they're extremely dangerous. You can alter the structure of proteins. We'll talk about that here shortly. Change the enzymatic activity. So enzymes are basically what fuel your body and metabolic processes in your body. So if those enzymes aren't working properly because pH is too low, you're in big trouble. And the nervous system and cardiovascular systems are really sensitive to changes in pH. And a pH that drops below 6.8 or above 7.7 can be fatal. So some important terms to review are pH. We should know what that is. Basically, the hydrogen ion concentrations in solution, the pH value is a number between 0 and 14. And the higher the hydrogen ion concentration, the lower the pH. An acidic condition is a pH below 7, where hydrogen ions predominate. A solution that's above a pH of 7 has low hydrogen ion content, but typically higher hydroxide, OH, concentrations. And neutral is a solution with a pH of about 7, where the solution contains an equal number of hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. So a neutral pH is 7. Acidic is below 7. And basic is above 7. So our body sits at about a slightly basic or alkaline state at any given time. An acid is a substance that basically releases hydrogen ions, that decreases pH. A base basically releases hydroxide ions, or takes up hydrogen ions, which increases pH. And then a buffer solution is the last thing here I want to talk about. The buffer solution basically opposes changes in pH by removing or replacing hydrogen ions, basically taking them out of solution so they can't impact changes in pH. Acidosis and alkalosis are physiological conditions. So acidosis is caused by a change in plasma pH below 7.35. And severe acidosis is deadly because central nervous system function deteriorates. Contractions at the heart can be weakened or irregular, which can cause major problems. And peripheral vasodilation, an increase in the size of the passageway through blood vessels, causes a severe drop in blood pressure. And if you can't maintain blood pressure, cardiovascular function will shut down. Alkalosis is when your body becomes too basic. It's a pH above 7.45, which is extremely rare. Remember, I said that acidosis is much more prevalent. pHs that drop and an increase in hydrogen ions concentrations is much more prevalent than the opposite. It is very dangerous, but it is very rare. So carbon dioxide production impacts pH. So as you are using blood glucose to produce ATP in metabolism, carbon dioxide gets produced. And that carbon dioxide combines with water to form carbonic acid, this molecule here, H2CO3. And H2CO3, carbonic acid, is really weak and it splits to a molecule called bicarbonate. So basically, as CO2 production increases, pH drops because carbon dioxide is an acid. It contributes to acidity in the blood, so pH will drop. And vice versa if CO2 is decreased. So here's basically what happens. CO2 rises, carbon dioxide is produced, combines with water to form carbonic acid. That splits spontaneously to hydrogen ion and a bicarbonate ion. So look where carbon dioxide basically gets packaged into bicarbonate. And bicarbonate is a major buffer in the extracellular fluid. So these buffering systems temporarily, and I have temporarily huge because this is temporary until the lungs or the kidney can excrete these ions that are affecting pH. So buffering systems temporarily compensate for shifts in pH by just like jeopardizing, taking up hydrogen ions out of or releasing them into circulation. So basically, anions function as a weak base. So anions are negatively charged, and they can combine with a positively charged hydrogen ion to create this molecule that basically grabs a hold of a hydrogen ion and takes it out of solution. If pH is too low, this is the equation here, right? So, and then if pH is too high, that same molecule can release a hydrogen ion. So basically you've got anions all over the body, like proteins are negatively charged anions. Proteins can act as a buffer by grabbing a hold of a hydrogen ion for a period of time until it can be excreted. Which is really, really quick and easy way to buffer. When we buffer, so if you also look back, I'm going to flip back to this slide. There's bicarbonate. There's a negatively charged ion that can combine with hydrogen and convert to carbonic acid. And then that splits to carbon dioxide and hydrogen, or water. So this equation can run in either direction, depending on the needs of the body and which acid needs to be buffered. And they do that just by combining the positively charged hydrogen ion, taking it out of solution for a period of time until it can be excreted. So the buffering systems just, again, temporarily compensate for changes in pH and maintain pH in a normal range. But your kidneys and your lungs excrete those wastes once the buffers have transported those wastes to the lungs or to the kidneys. So the kidneys can secrete or even generate hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. Remember, bicarbonate is what carries carbon dioxide through the blood so that it can be exhaled from the lungs. And the respiratory rate, your breathing rate will increase or decrease that can control carbon dioxide elimination. So your kidneys can produce or excrete bicarbonate or hydrogen ions that help maintain pH in the blood. And your lungs can either increase or decrease breathing rate to increase how much carbon dioxide is exhaled or decrease that, depending on what's needed in the body. And you've got three major buffering systems that temporarily grab a hold of acids in the body and transport them to where they can be excreted or eliminated from the body. The phosphate buffering system is a major buffering system in the intracellular fluid, so inside cells buffering occurs. In the extracellular fluid, the bicarbonate buffering system is the major player. And then you've got proteins in both the extracellular fluid and the intracellular fluid that can serve as a temporary buffer. And all they do, again, these proteins, as I mentioned, are typically negatively charged. So if they're negatively charged, they can grab a hold of this positively charged hydrogen ion and scoop it up, basically render it inactive, and it's unable to change pH until that is transported to the lungs or to the kidneys, to the kidneys to be excreted. So your intracellular buffer basically has an immediate effect on pH by converting carbon dioxide to carbonic acid. So here's what happens. You have carbon dioxide produced by cells. It's sent into a red blood cell, combined with water to form bicarbonate. Bicarbonate then gets sent out of red blood cells and remains in the plasma, and that gets transported through the plasma to the lungs, where that equation basically shifts in the opposite direction. Hydrogen ions that were once bound to Hb as hemoglobin, so back over here where bicarbonic acid is produced and splits to bicarbonate to carry carbon dioxide, but produces a hydrogen ion, that hydrogen ion gets bound to hemoglobin, so it doesn't affect pH at all. At the lungs, where carbon dioxide needs to be exhaled, the hydrogen ion gets dissociated from hemoglobin, because it then needs to pick up oxygen later. It gets bound to bicarbonate to produce carbonic acid, which splits to water and then carbon dioxide that diffuses out into the lungs to be exhaled. So you basically can, in either direction, run this equation. If these red blood cells are at the tissue where carbon dioxide is being produced, it gets converted to bicarbonate. If you're at the lungs, where you have a lot of bicarbonate, and then hydrogen ions get released from hemoglobin, that equation shifts in this direction to produce carbon dioxide, which will then get exhaled from the lungs. And that's where carbon dioxide that was produced in the tissue gets eliminated. But along the way, bicarbonate carries that carbon dioxide, so it can't impact pH. Protein buffers are what I mentioned a couple of times. So here's an amino acid. An amino acid can be negatively charged. So at a normal pH, amino acids are negatively charged. If pH drops and there's more hydrogen ions in solution now, those hydrogen ions can attach to different sections of the amino acid on the amino end, so where the nitrogen is located, or even on the carboxyl end, where carbon is bound to oxygen, double bound to oxygen, two oxygens basically. So those groups, the carboxyl group here, the amino group here, can both grab a hold of a hydrogen ion, and this R is a side chain that makes it basically unique to each amino acid. Can also grab a hold of a hydrogen ion. So the multiple hydrogen ions can be basically rendered inactive, basically scooped up by an amino acid, and can't impact or change pH, and gets carried by a protein, by amino acids, to the lungs or to the kidneys to be excreted. And these are reversible reactions. So basically, the reversible reactions just protect against the effects of acids being generated by metabolic activity, so the production of ATP. So bicarbonate can be produced by the kidney if it's needed, or excreted by the kidney if it's needed. It gets produced in the tissues as bicarbonate. So you have a reserve of bicarbonate from the kidney. The buffering system, as hydrogen ions are being produced or carbon dioxide is being produced, you can basically shift this equation in either direction to basically maintain the buffering, your body's ability to buffer. If you have too much bicarbonate or too little, the kidney can either excrete it or produce it to help buffer acidity in the blood. The consequence if too much acid is produced and our body isn't able to buffer that acidity is called metabolic acidosis. Basically, when a ton of hydrogen ions are produced or released and pH drops, what happens in response of that is an increase in respiratory rate, which lowers carbon dioxide levels and converts more carbonic acid to water and carbon dioxide. So if you increase your breathing rate and you exhale more CO2, then more CO2 can be produced by combining hydrogen ions. Where is that? Hydrogen ions here's hydrogen ions with bicarbonate, and then you'll produce more carbon dioxide. So if CO2 drops in the blood, you'll shift this equation towards this direction to produce more carbon dioxide, and that gets rid of hydrogen ions in the blood. At the same time, the kidney is able to secrete and excrete hydrogen ions by filtering them out of the blood and sending them and excreting them from the body. So there's two different mechanisms that can happen in response to acidosis: increasing respiratory rate, breathing rate, which stimulates the production of more carbon dioxide, and then also secreting more from the kidney. So respiratory acidosis can occur as well. If you decrease breathing rate and less carbon dioxide is generated, is exhaled, and you're not exhaling as much as you are generating, you can build up carbon dioxide in the blood as a result of a problem in the lungs, like hypoventilation. To respond to that, you increase breathing rate to breathe off more of the CO2 that was just built up and get rid of it from the body. And as well, increases in secretion of hydrogen ions by the kidney, and the kidney will also generate more bicarbonate ions as well. Again, more bicarbonate can carry CO2. So there's a response to all of that occurs. Metabolic alkalosis. Remember, alkalosis isn't nearly as prevalent as acidosis, but it develops when hydrogen ions are removed from body fluids and pH rises. And the opposite occurs. A decrease in respiratory rate basically increases carbon dioxide levels, which will convert more carbon dioxide to carbonic acid. And in that same equation, if bicarbonate's produced, then hydrogen ions are being produced to help bring pH back up. The kidneys will then secrete less hydrogen and excrete more bicarbonate. So if pH is rising, then a decrease in respiratory rate leads to an increase in CO2, which forces this equation in this direction to produce more hydrogen ions and more bicarbonate. And then the kidneys will secrete and excrete less hydrogen ions, leaving more in the blood, or even produce hydrogen ions and secrete and excrete more bicarbonate. If respiratory alkalosis occurs, that usually occurs because of some kind of hyperventilation. So your breathing rate increases dramatically. You breathe off a bunch of carbon dioxide, and in doing that, carbon dioxide in the blood drops. So we need to bring it back up. The response is decreasing respiratory rate to allow carbon dioxide to build back up in the blood, but also decreased secretion by the kidneys, which holds on to more hydrogen ions in the blood, helping bring pH back down. And the kidneys will excrete more bicarbonate. And there's the kind of overview slide there. Okay, and that then, my friends, does it for chapter 17. So I will see you in chapter 18.